again to a call, but the seller of the call is you're going to have an SC for a short call. Now, long put down here and the short put over here. And once you've constructed the basic diagram and have entries in the proper spot, you can then start adding these key features that we'll be describing for options investors. And one of the critical things that you want to remember about any option position is the question of, if I'm in this position, what direction do I want to see the market value of the stock moving, up or down? So what you look at, of course, is that the person who buys a call generally wants to see the stock rising. That's the direction in which you'll make money. Whereas the person who sells a call does not want to see the stock go up. They want to see the stock drop. Well, above or below what? Well, remember, that's the break-even point. That's the critical dividing line between making money and losing money for an options investor. So we'll summarize that in the diagram too. The break-even point is the strike price plus the premium. And notice that overlaps both of these quadrants because the break-even point is the same for the buyer of the call and the seller of the call. The difference between the two is which side of the break-even point would you like to be on? If you buy a call, then you want to be above the break-even point. That is, you want the stock to go higher. Whereas if you sell a call, you would like to see the stock go below the break-even point. Now, another critical issue with options, and this is very critical if you're dealing with investors who are considering these options, is how much money can you make and how much money can you lose in dealing with the options? And we'll describe those with the two words, risk and reward. And when you see risk and reward, we're thinking the maximum risk and the maximum reward that might be encountered when dealing with a particular position. So, first of all, let's take the person who buys a call. Now remember, if you buy a call, you pay a premium. What's the worst that could happen? Well, remember that you can choose to exercise or not exercise. So the worst that could happen is that you choose not to exercise and you allow your option to expire. In that case, you would simply be at the premium that you paid up front for the option in the first place. On the other hand, how much money can you make? Well, as long as the stock goes above the break-even point, the higher it goes, the more money you would make as the owner of the call. And so we would say that your reward is theoretically unlimited, that there is no maximum amount. Now, what about the person who is on the opposite side of this transaction? Now, that's the seller of the call. Remember that they receive a premium up front. So what's the best that can happen for them? The best that could happen would be that the option would expire and therefore they're not required to do anything. They don't have to go through the transaction, and yet they still get to keep the premium up front. So that, in fact, would be their maximum reward. They would get to earn the premium. On the other hand, here's our real problem. What happens if the stock doesn't cooperate? Remember that the seller of the stock wants it to go down, but what if instead the stock rises? And remember, the higher the stock goes, the more money you have to pay to buy the stock and then turn around and sell it at the fixed rate price. The higher the stock goes, the more money you lose. And who knows how high the stock would go. So in theory, the risk is unlimited. Now, this particular feature should be a real red flag. It tells us that we need to be very careful about involving investors in this position because there is no real limit to the amount of money that they could lose if things go wrong with this particular option transaction. Now, in addition to a diagram, let's summarize some of the basic features that you've seen so far about call options. Here's a list of some concepts that you should associate with call buyers. A call buyer has, first of all, the right to buy the underlying stock at the strike price. And you really need to be able to remember that phrase as soon as you see someone who is a call buyer. You can always go back to that basic definition to help you understand what is going on. The second feature of a call buyer, they're the one that had to pay the premium in order to acquire the call option, and in fact, that premium would be their maximum possible loss. They hope that the stock will rise. The higher it goes, the more money that they'll make. So their potential gain is virtually unlimited. Now, when you encounter a problem about a call writer, remember the following. Remember, this is the person who has the obligation to sell the underlying stock. Again, this is a real basic idea. As soon as you see call writers, you need to think obligation to sell. You need to automatically associate those terms. Also, if you write a call, you receive a premium. That's why you did it. You receive that money up front. Now that would be your maximum gain. You're attempting to generate some income by earning that premium, by taking on this obligation. Now, of course, you hope that you'll never have to go through with the obligation. You hope that the stock price does not rise, because if it does, that is your real problem. Your risk potential is virtually unlimited. There is no ceiling on the loss that you might suffer. Now, we've reviewed the basics of call options and include that in our diagram, but now we need to turn our attention to put options. Like call options, each put option involves two investors. So here we have an XYZ January 60 put. Now remember that there is an owner of this put option, and then we'll see that someone is the owner of a put option. We need to think that this person who has the right to sell the underlying stock. So owner of the put, right to sell, is the association that we would make. In this case, the person who is the owner has the right to sell 100 shares of XYZ stock at $60 per share until the January expiration. There also must be a writer of the put, though. So remember, for every person who is an owner, there has to be a person who is the writer. Without two people, you don't have an option contract. In this case, the writer of the put is the person who has the obligation to buy the stock of 100 XYZ at $60 per share until the January expiration if they get an assignment. Now, to understand puts in more detail, let's consider the viewpoint of the person who is the put owner. In this particular case, let's see what comes out. Remember that this person has the right to sell the stock at 60. That's what their contract allows. Suppose the stock falls to 55 in the open market. Okay, so you would go, for example, to the New York Stock Exchange and buy the stock for 55 if you wish to do so. What this investor, in fact, could do is buy the stock in the open market for $55 per share, then using the put option, force the writer to buy it for $60 per share. So notice that we're going to earn a profit. The difference between the price we buy it for in the open market and the price we sell it to the writer for under the put option contract. In fact, the farther the stock drops, the greater the opportunity for the put owner to buy the stock cheaply and sell it for the strike price. On the other hand, suppose that the stock were to rise to 63. Now remember, you have the right to sell it using your contract. So for 60, but in the open market, you could sell it for 63. So it would make no sense for you to use your put option in this situation. To sell stock at 60 when elsewhere you can sell it for 63. It would also make no sense to go to the marketplace and buy the stock at 63, only to turn around and force the put writer to buy it at the contract price of 60. So this investor will not exercise the option. And again, if this continues through expiration, the option will expire worthless. So it would seem in this situation, using this example and seeing what would happen, the put owner actually wants the stock to fall. In that situation, they'd be able to buy the stock cheaply in the open market